understand you have a speech to make at the beginning.
So I'm going to say a few words here.
No, I mean, you give us some short speech before.
Oh, sure. Okay. I just want to put my notes down.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for having me at Japan CPAC. A great honor to be here. On Monday, President Trump is going to announce, according to the Financial Times of London, he's going to announce a new national security strategy for the United States. He's been working on this national security strategy for almost, I think, 9 or 10 months since he came into office. And I believe what the Financial Times of London told us on Friday, he's going to make give a speech and roll out his national security strategy. The centerpiece of this strategy, I believe, is going to put China, he's going to talk about China as a major strategic competitor to the United States in basically every area and every endeavor. And at least according to the Financial Times, and Mike Allen and the people at Axios, which is a very new cutting-edge news service in the United States, is going to actually lay out that China is a economic aggressor to both the United States and its allies. Let's go back to 2016. The centerpiece of 2016 is that Brexit and the 2016 election are inextricably linked. What happened in England, in the United Kingdom, foreshadowed what happened in America. It was essentially working class people, middle class people, deciding they wanted to have their sovereignty back. At the heart of it is the fact that the elites in the United Kingdom and the elites in the United States of America believed that the United Kingdom and America are in decline. Nigel Farage, the leader of UKIP and really the leader of the Brexit movement, on the morning after the vote, said if it had not been for Breitbart London, which is a site that we set up as part of the Breitbart family of sites in 2013, if it was not for Breitbart London, this is what he told BBC, there would not be a Brexit. Because Breitbart London allowed the ideas of the Brexit movement to kind of simmer and then get out to the public and be able to kind of be a counter to the Remain campaign. The same thing happened to President Trump. The Breitbart site was a platform for President Trump and kind of this populist, nationalist, conservative, traditionalist movement that focused on economic nationalism to get out there. But the key that connects Brexit in June of 16 and the Trump victory in November 16 is China. The exporting of Chinese deflation and Chinese industrial overcapacity is essentially what gutted the Midlands, heartland of England, and is what gutted the upper Midwest of the United States. It was the ability, it was the reason that President Trump was able to put together this coalition of Reagan Democrats, working class people, people who had not voted for a Republican in many, many decades, combined with the conservative base that led to victories in Pennsylvania, in Ohio, in Michigan, and Wisconsin. J.D. Vance, the fantastic author of a book called Hillbilly Elegies, which was a New York Times bestseller. It really walked through the sociological underpinnings of the Trump revolution. Pointed out to me a number of studies that were done by MIT and Harvard that showed a direct link between the factories that left for China, the workers left behind, and the opioid addiction problem. Essentially, it showed a culture and a civilization that was imploding. The elites in the United States of America We're very comfortable with the decline of the United States. But the working class people, the deplorables, as Hillary Clinton called them, the hobbits, the forgotten man and woman, the silent majority in the United States of America, they are not comfortable with that. And that's what you saw in November of 2016. Really a revolt against and a rebellion against our decline. The reason that Monday is so important is that President Trump has, gone out of his way, I think, to try to reach out to China. We had the Mar-a-Lago summit, and then we had the visit after the 19th Party Congress. President Trump has been very open, I think, to a dialogue with China and the leaders of China. But I believe, and I just get this from what I read in the paper, I don't have any special information or any inside information. I'm just quoting from the Financial Times of London and from Reuters, is that it appears that he is getting frustrated. And so now, all of these trade issues that we talked about, and I want to be very specific, the 301 on intellectual property, the 232 on steel, and the 201 on aluminum, I think it looks like they may all be implemented in a combination of a national security package that links together our trade, our commerce, our capital markets with the United States national security. And it's really the first time, and I give President Trump credit for this, it's really the first time in American history that we've actually linked those all together. And I think it's a fundamental shift in America's view, and it's going to lead to, I think, a much more aggressive America in defending her vital national security interests. The key to this, I believe, is the 301, and I want to take a second to talk about that. You could argue, up until President Trump became President of the United States, that America was a tributary state to China. We have a $500 billion or $485 billion annual trade deficit with China. But by the way, it'd be much higher, except that we export natural gas and oil and wheat and timber and copper and hogs, beef, Boeing jets and Apple products. Oh, excuse me, we don't export Boeing jets and Apple products because now we have joint venture, I think, with Boeing, and then Apple, I think, makes most of the products there. Essentially, the United States have been turned into Jamestown to China's Great Britain. And that all the high value-added manufacturing had essentially been taken by China, right? Had been shipped to China. And all the United States was really a tributary state sending China raw material. Well, President Trump ran on a campaign that, number one, those jobs have to come back from China. Those manufacturing jobs have to come back. And he was mocked and ridiculed by the elites in the United States. He was mocked and ridiculed by the elite media in the United States. He was mocked and ridiculed by all the great financial papers of the Wall Street Journal, Financial Times of London, that this can't possibly happen. What President Trump looked at was that on our intellectual property, high technology, $3.5 trillion in the last 10 years has been appropriated by China for market access by U.S. companies at $350 billion a year. And he started the process of 301, which is a national security implementation, to say we can no longer afford, we can no longer be selling our birthright of what is the flower of a capitalist system, right? Our innovation. We can't give our innovation to China and just give it without market access. So we start the 301. The 232 is on steel. We can no longer allow, right, the 850 million tons of steel capacity that China's built up over the last 10 or 15 years to suppress worldwide prices. The same with aluminum. So across the board, you've seen President Trump getting in place those things for a strategy that he will announce on Monday. In addition, I think it's the first time that he is really setting in the strategic construct that China is bringing together all forces of national power, right? Kind of in a united front across every endeavor, financial, economic, industrial, military. In a combined national strategy against the United States in the West and also its allies in Japan. That's why I think Monday, at least according to the Financial Times and to the Reuters, of what they've leaked so far, it looks like it'll be a fundamental shift in America. It will be a rejection, a total rejection of where the American elites have allowed our country to go. If you think about all the geniuses, right, in the American intelligentsia that have had to deal with China, you know, they were the ones that told us in the late, and this is, by the way, the Bush and the Clinton administrations, right? And what Hillary Clinton ran on is what was going to be the new Clinton administration. They told us that in the late 1990s, early 2000s, as China got wealthier, it would become more democratic and more free market capitalist. Well, the exact opposite has happened. China has become more and more wealthy. And yet it has become more of a mercantilist, authoritative system. I mean, their business model is a total rejection of free market capitalism. Their business model is a total rejection of the international rules-based order that the United States, essentially taxpayers, underwrite with their dollars, and the young people in America, the working class young people in America, underwrite with their blood. This has been an abject failure. And if you look in history, probably one of the greatest abject failures of any great power. If you look at how the United States has comported itself from 1992, with the fall, or the late 80s and early 1992, with the fall of the Berlin Wall and the collapse of Soviet communism, what they called the end of history, until basically Donald Trump's campaign in 2016, Donald Trump's presidency, and then Donald Trump's strategic plan, which will lay out, as we're told, next week. It's really been a 25-year strategic holiday, in that we allowed, according to Financial Times and Reuters, what they call our strategic competitor now, not our strategic partner, our strategic competitor. We've exacerbated their ability to game the system. We've exacerbated their ability to play by their own rules. We've acted as an accelerant to that. Now the question will be later, how did that happen? Was that like the second law of thermodynamics? Was that some principle of physics, of world politics? The answer is no. This was done by human agency. This was done by the conscious decisions by the financial, economic, and political elite of the United States of America. And it was Donald Trump's understanding and talking about this for 20 and 30 years. If you go back, Donald Trump's consistency in what he has said about China has been remarkable. And now, in the first year of his administration, the first 10 months of his administration, he's getting to act on it. And I want to talk about that administration for a second, and also, I think, hopefully, to alleviate some fears of people in Japan. What you see in the United States right now is the Trump miracle versus the nullification project. Okay? The Trump miracle really comes down to three basic areas. The three areas he promised the American people he was going to do. When I came into the campaign in August of 2016, I think there were 85 days left. You know, President Trump, I believe, was down like 12 to 16 points, double digits down in every battleground state. We only had 85 days left. And the plan was very simple. Hold up Hillary Clinton as the tribune, the representative of a corrupt and incompetent elite. And that Donald Trump would run as an agent of change. And that change would be in three areas. Number one, we will get our sovereignty back by stopping mass illegal immigration and starting to get our hands around legal immigration. Number two, we will bring back manufacturing jobs to the United States of America. And number three, we will get ourselves out of these pointless foreign wars that we've fought ad infinitum for 16, 17 years. and spent, according to the Watson Center at Brown University, $5.6 trillion without victory in sight. The Trump miracle is that President Trump's delivering all three of those. We have the lowest border crossings, I think in 46 or 47 years. We actually have a plan for legal immigration put up by Senators Cotton and Perdue that would change our system to be more like Canada and Australia, be more about skills-based. And we cut legal immigration in half so that working class people, black and Hispanic working class people and the children of that would have a shot one day for high technology jobs and be able to raise up the citizens of the United States. His economic nationalist program on the economy, and by the way, economic nationalism, he's been accused, we've been accused of being xenophobic and ethno-nationalist and white supremacist and white separatist, and, on and on and on and on and on. But President Trump has said, economic nationalism doesn't care about your race, doesn't care about your color, doesn't care about your ethnicity, doesn't care about your religion, doesn't care about your gender, does not care about your sexual preference, doesn't care about any of that. Only cares about one thing, that you're a citizen of the United States of America. And as a citizen, you're going to be in a different category. You're not going to be the last person thought of. You're going to be the first person thought of. And look at the results of his economic nationalism. The Federal Reserve, I think it was on Friday, in their new forecasting model, the New York Fed, projected that the fourth quarter of this year, the growth is going to be 4%. You have to remember, the mainstream media and all the financial press and everybody that followed Donald Trump during the campaign mocked and ridiculed Donald Trump, his economic plan. He didn't know anything. He didn't understand any policy. That this stuff is all phony. He doesn't know what he's talking about. If Barack Obama had delivered the results that Donald Trump's delivered in his first year, they would want to award Barack Obama a Nobel Prize in economics. President Trump, without a tax cut, remember the tax cut doesn't come to next week. Now some people say a little of this growth is because of the front running of the tax cut, maybe. But what we know is because of his limited immigration, right? We have 4.7% Hispanic unemployment. I think the lowest in living memory. Lowest black unemployment in 17 years. Lowest overall unemployment in 18 or 19 years. Wages in agricultural and construction are starting to come back, particularly at the lowest level, at the workers' level. This growth is unprecedented. He's got the highest business confidence, I think, in 20 years, the highest consumer confidence, I think, ever reported. Stock market's up 35%, 33%. Because of his economic nationalism, because he's saying, I'm going to have tariffs, I'm going to have quotas, I'm going to have restrictions, foreign industries investing in the United States like never before, to get ahead of that. And you're seeing 10% growth in plant and equipment. And you're seeing robust 40,000 manufacturing jobs in the month of November. 2.2 million jobs since he was inaugurated. That's economic nationalism. And that's what President Trump has delivered. The other part of the Trump miracle is national security. In I think it was December, down in Mar-a-Lago, he was working on writing his inaugural address. He wrote the following lines. We will rejuvenate old alliances and build new ones. And we will unite the civilized world to eradicate radical Islamic terrorism from the face of the earth. I told the president at the time, and others that were working with him on the speech, that that's a pretty big check that you're going to have to cash. And he wanted that line in there. It was one of the most powerful lines of the inaugural. Within 10 months of his inauguration, of noon on January 20th of 2016, the physical caliphate of ISIS was destroyed. This is a caliphate that in 2014 had 8 million people under slavery. It was bigger and more robust than the countries of Iraq and Syria combined. It had oil fields and wheat fields. It was recruiting actively in Western Europe and the United States. It was arguably one of the most robust nation states in the Middle East. Complete and total annihilation. Has he gotten credit for that? See, any of the opposition party media, has one person stood up and said, job well done? No. More importantly, even than that, it was President Trump that went to the Arab world, that went to the Muslim world in Riyadh in May of 2016 and gave a speech that the mainstream media completely dismissed. He says, we are here as partners to help work with the Muslim world, help work with the Arab world on three things. Number one, we will help you, but you must eradicate the financing of radical Islamic terrorism from your countries. Number two, we understand, and General al-Sisi laid this out in Cairo in January, I think in 2013, January 1st, 2013, that Islam will go through a modernization phase, and that we are here to help, but it's got to be done by the Muslim nations. And they said, yes, we'll take the lead. In fact, they built a magnificent center in Riyadh for the furtherance of the moderation of Islam. And number three, we will help to put together and work with the Arab nations to stop Persian aggression throughout the Middle East. Several weeks after that, the United Arab Republic and the Saudis put a blockade on Qatar and said, we're not going to stop this until all the radical Islamic terrorism financing stops. That you cannot finance the Muslim Brotherhood, you can't finance Hamas, and oh, by the way, you're playing footsie with Iran, you're not going to be able to do that anymore because they're financing Hezbollah. Then you saw the action that took place in Saudi Arabia. A young MBS comes up, is going to be the next king. He arrests 1,000 radical clerics. Then he starts the clean house of other elements there. What is that? That is bold action in the Middle East from countries that have not taken bold action. And what does it show? I think the cornerstone of the Trump doctrine, which I've always interpreted the Trump doctrine to be, where it's in the vital national security interest of the United States of America, it will be in the vital national security interest of local partners. And they will act as true allies, not protectorates. They will actually not only help shoulder the burden, they will be at the forefront of the action because it's in their interest that it will happen. That's the Trump miracle. In 10 months, he has completely and totally changed the attitude of the United States. He's changed our attitude in the world. America first. It's not America as isolationist. It's not America alone. It's never been that. Donald Trump's never said that. It's America engaged in the world as never before. But is it in partnership that is also on America's terms? Not just in these kind of faceless international organizations, these globalist institutions run by people in Davos and people in Brussels and people in Geneva. No. This is where the American people hold their politicians accountable, and their politicians and leaders are in alliances and partnerships with others throughout the world, principally on a bilateral basis. Now, opposite of that, you have the nullification project. From the moment he won, it was not acceptable to the opposition party media. It was not acceptable to the global elites. It was unacceptable that hobbits and the deplorables and the forgotten man and woman and the silent majority of the United States, the working men and women of our country that have been the backbone of the greatest nation on earth, it was unacceptable to them that their representative won. And that they were so dead wrong and caught by surprise. Remember, they had the celebration. The party was all set to go. And Donald Trump took it away from them. Not just took it away from them, put the country on a totally different course. One that represents the interest of the working men and women in the United States. Black, Hispanic, Asian, white, doesn't matter their color. What it matters is that in trade deals that have unfair competition to American labor, or illegal aliens flying across our border so that they can compete with black and Hispanic working class and keep their wages down, that those days are over. That Donald Trump is their representative. And this nullification project takes on many ways. It's three investigative committees on Capitol Hill. I have no problem if they want to investigate Russian collusion. If they really did that, they could wrap it up in a week. That's not what they're trying to do. And I blame the Republican establishment for those three on Capitol Hill. It should have been done. It should have had a mandate. It should have been wrapped up, and a report should have been done. But you have guys, Democrats like Schiff of California and Mark Warner, who's going to run against President Trump in 2020, running these committees. And Schiff is now blaming me in the last 24 hours. Oh, they're listening to Bannon. They're trying to shut stuff down. I'm just trying to get some good order and discipline in the system. These shouldn't be open-ended investigations of a sitting president by his own party. Then you have the Mueller investigation. I've never been opposed to that. I think with his mandate of Russian collusion, that Mr. Mueller should have free rein to that. But I've also said it shouldn't be some open-ended, mandate just on a fishing expedition or some sort of witch hunt. You also have states' attorney generals now, after the president and his colleagues. You also have, the Morning Joe crowd and Bob Corker talking about the 25th Amendment, talking about the president should be in an adult home. That he's lost a step. And now you have the women's situation of the Billy Bush weekend that was fully litigated and settled on November 8th of 2016, when the American people could weigh and measure it and came to a conclusion and voted him in office. They want to go back and redo that all again. They want to have a siege on the White House from every different direction. They try to take his eye off the ball, to try to suck up his time and energy. And look what he's achieved, both in our sovereignty, in our economics, and our national security. I believe it's unprecedented in this country in the first year of office. And it's certainly unprecedented with the forces arrayed against him. You have to understand something. Between the opposition party, media, infrastructure, the establishment of Wall Street and Silicon Valley and Hollywood, the imperial capital of Washington, D.C., of both Democrats and Republican establishment, he was sent as a disruptor of that system because the American people said, those people are comfortable with our decline and we're not. And you're our agent of change. And that agent of change means you're going to have to be disruptive. Well, you've seen him be disruptive. And all I see is a string of successes. Now, you wouldn't get that from watching the nightly news or reading the great papers of record of our country, the New York Times, the Washington Post. You just think it's chaos and calamity. Well, you can't get 4% growth in chaos. You can't destroy ISIS, the physical caliphate, destroy it in Mosul and Raqqa with allies. You can't have the Arab world moving now with boldness to eradicate the financing of radical Islamic terrorism. You can't confront China, which should have been done 25 years ago, in chaos. You do it in order, and you do it to instill order. It is revolting to me, disgusting, that the media hounds Donald Trump like they hound him. And let me go back and state some facts. I had a lovely session with the media, and I don't mean to pick on the Japanese media. I'm using you as a proxy for global mainstream media. Think about how dead wrong the mainstream media was in 2016. The great papers of Europe and the BBC and all the great networks in Europe, okay, and the Times of London and the Financial Times and the Wall Street Journal, right, the Washington Post, the New York Times, CBS, NBC, CNN. When they got those exit polls at 5 o'clock, and by the way, the exit polls, and I told President Trump as a candidate, from day one, you have a 100% chance of winning in August 13th, and here's why. Forget all the polls. Forget that you're double digit now. Forget all that. It's only two numbers that count. 2/3 of the American people think we're on the wrong track. 2/3, 1/3. And more importantly, 75% of your countrymen think America's in decline. And if you're the voice that says we're not in decline, you will win. Well, when the exit polls came in at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, we were getting crushed. It was going to be a landslide for Hillary Clinton. And you can see the celebration starting in these newsrooms. You can see the mocking on Twitter. The mocking and ridiculing of the Trump campaign and President Trump. And guess what? At 2:30 in the morning the following day, Donald J. Trump was President-elect of the United States. Name me one editor, one executive, one writer, one columnist from any news service, television network, paper that were not wrong, dead wrong. Name me one that got fired. You can't, because they weren't. And that tells you everything you need to know about these guys. This is not a free press, right? They're the mouthpiece for a globalist agenda that goes against the basic citizens of the United States of America and every country they deal with. They're part of the problem, not part of the solution. And somebody says, oh, Bannon, there you are pulling out the media. Look at what they've done to President Trump. Have you heard about his successes? Do you hear those successes lauded? No. It's mocked and ridiculed every day. Let's talk about why Monday is going to be so important. China ascended. To show you what a pathetic job they do, I believe the most important political speech of the 21st century was not President Trump's inaugural address, which at the time it was given was the most important political speech. Even one that's more important than that is President Xi's speech at the 19th Party Congress. 3.5 hours long, I think it's 68 pages. You know, besides a couple of articles are written, some TV coverage, very limited. In the West, it was virtually not covered. Here's why it's important. President Xi not only claimed that we were at kind of economic war with the United States, more importantly, declared it's over, we won. The number 2049, which has been in every other speech they ever gave, which was the 100th anniversary of their success in the Chinese Civil War, of the Chinese communists coming to power in 1949. I don't believe 2049 is ever mentioned the first time in speech. 2050 is mentioned as the beginning of a new era. And they lay out 5 areas where, if completed in the next 5 to 10 years, they will become a hegemon. Number 1 is Made in China 2025, where they're going to dominate the 10 leading cutting-edge industries in the world, including advanced chip manufacturing, artificial intelligence, and robotics. If they win that game, they will dominate global advanced manufacturing, high value-added manufacturing. Also talked about One Belt, One Road. One Belt, One Road, just to make sure you understand the audacious nature of it. They say China's not an expansionist power. Well, they're geopolitically expansionist. They've taken the 3 great theories of 19th and 20th century geopolitics. Mackinder's, the Heartland strategy, Mahan's, the naval strategy that the British and British built their empire on, and Steekman's sea lines of communications. They've taken the 3 great theories in geopolitics and combined them into one project. Basically, a road that will connect Central Asia and political Islam to the mercantilist authoritative system they've got into one market. A string of pearls, then of naval bases like Mahan and the British dreamed of. And Steekman's sea lines of communication to push Japan in the west and the South China Sea and other areas 1,000 miles off the mainland of Asia. If completed, they understand this, they will be a dominant power. Number 3 is the rollout of 5G. Number 4 is the conversion of the yuan into petrodollars to basically take away the United States' ability to be the reserve currency. And number 5 is advances in financial technology, which will take away the West one piece of leverage, which is to decouple their companies and their banks from global capital markets and from money flows. Once those 5 are completed, game, set, match. And they've used all forces of national strategy to do that. While the West, the elites in the West, have understood that and looked the other way. Now, where does that leave us? President Xi's speech is pretty straightforward. Their strategy is audacious, but it's pretty straightforward. They don't make any bones about it. Of the 3 most dangerous regions in the world, I think, I'm just another guy, but I think is the Gulf, the South China Sea and the Straits of Malacca, and the Northwest Pacific, between Japan and Korea. The South China Sea they call a territorial sea. 2 of those 3, by the way, directly affect the nation of Japan and the Japanese people. The South China Sea, if the South China Sea is cut off, you're cut off from your natural resource supply, your oil supply. And the Northwest Pacific is like the Balkans in 1914. One match, one false move. The law of unintended consequences can cut either way. The intellectuals had this concept called the Thucydides trap, and it's why Japan is so important. It's about, in 16 times, I think Henry Kissinger came up with this theory, and Graham Allison's just written a brilliant book about it. In 16 times in world history, we've had a declining power and a rising power. Of the 16 times, 12 times have been led to massive wars. And only a few times have they been able to manage it. The key to this is that of the declining power. And I think the point that I want to make today is that the United States and Japan do not have to be declining powers. It's not a law of physics that this is happening. This is not the second law of thermodynamics. This is human agency. And we've seen in the United States that working men and women have rejected it. They said, hey, here's a way to avoid the Thucydides trap. Let's not decline. Let's make America great again. Again. And that Donald Trump is our vessel and our instrument to start that change. The same thing is happening in Japan. That's why I'm so glad to be here at CPAC. That's why I'm a huge believer in CPAC, the American Conservative Union, and CPAC. In the United States has been a catalyst and has energized the conservative movement. Matt Schlapp and Dan Snyder have done an incredible job of turning around a more-bound institution and making it cutting edge. I'm so proud of what they've done in doing regional CPACs like in Kansas, and international CPACs. And as soon as I heard about this, I said, hey, I'm coming, I got to be there. And I can see out in the audience and people I've met last night and today that there's an energy out there among conservatives. It's not a foregone conclusion that Japan and the United States have to decline and let China rise. Japan has every opportunity to seize its destiny, right? To reestablish its national identity in a partnership with the United States, a true partnership with the United States. Reverse of what the elites have allowed to happen. President Abe, in his relationship, I'm not giving you any inside information. It's out there in the press. He was the first one to get on a plane and come see President Trump. President Trump and him have spent many hours on the golf course bonding as individuals. Prime Minister Abe was the first head of state to be brought to come to Mar-a-Lago. They've got a terrific relationship. I know they feel very, very, not just comfortable with each other, but respect each other tremendously. And Prime Minister Abe, I think, is one of those leaders that I admire so much because he's instilled this patriotism and this nationalism. And nationalism is not a bad word. It means love of country, right? If you go back and look at something in President Xi, they talk about they're raising President Xi's thought to the level of Deng Xiaoping and Mao Zedong. So there'll be Mao Zedong thought and Deng Xiaoping thought, and now the thought of President Xi. One of the first things they talked about is that his, I don't know, it was not pan-national, I had some term for it. They said it's the first original thinking in geopolitics in 300 years. 300 years. I said, that's an interesting number. The Chinese, they never are random about numbers. The numbers mean something. I said, I wonder what that number means. If you go back 300 years, and I'm not a historian, but I believe you get to the Treaty of Westphalia, the beginning of the nation state, the beginning of the concept of the nation state. President Xi and the regime in Beijing's ambitions are global. They're audacious in their scope, frightening in their scale. And it is upon our generation to confront it, face it, and reverse it. And I think that's why Prime Minister Abe, by being and reinstilling the spirit of nationalism and talking about vital things that have to happen, like the rearmament of Japan, and other issues that may come up, including nuclear weapons in the future, is so fundamentally important to the partnership that we put together. I've gone a little too long, but I want to summarize one last thing. We're going through, for the next 10 or 15 or 20 years, the valley of decision. And go back and study what happened in other eras, the 1930s or other eras, where leaders of the world, leaders on the side of freedom, appeased people, didn't face reality, kicked the can down the road. All the easy decisions are decades behind us. We don't have any easy choices. We don't have any easy decisions. There are no easy options on the range of alternatives. There's only hard choices. There's only tough choices. But here's one thing I know. As a young naval officer in the 7th Fleet on the destroyer, I had the great honor to work in naval exercises with the Self-Defense Force of Japan and to see the men and women of the Japanese military. There's not a finer group of people in the world. And I know that if the great bonds of friendship, the great bonds of camaraderie we have between our country and the country of Japan and other countries out there, India, Singapore, other countries around the South China Sea, other countries that only want to be left alone to pursue their own national destinies. If we come together and come together as friends and partners, there's sunlit uplands ahead of us. But there's 10 or 15 years of tough choices and tough times. I want to thank you for inviting me here to the first CPAC.
Thank you very much. 本当こんな長く喋っていただけるとは思ってなかったので、一切。今日はパネルということだったんですけど、私の職業柄記者だもんで、いろいろご質問したいな。ご一緒に参加していただきますのが、小川太郎さん、ご存知のですか、文芸評論家。
どうも、皆さん、よろしくお願いします。Was that upbeat enough for a Sunday morning?
You spoke of the threat of China. We all agree. But why did you cancel TPP? Because it was not a trade agreement at all. It's China Containment Program. TPP is Trans-Pacific Partnership. It's not Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement. And we really regret that after that you canceled. China proudly hailed their new Silk Road project. And we really feel bad about it.
I think TPP is once again just like certain treaties, like even in NATO. Let's talk about NATO for a second. You know, the EU has essentially gotten a free ride off the United States. We can't get the NATO allies to pay 2% of their GDP for national defense. I think the Great Britain, France, and all the rest of NATO can only put up 3 or 4 combat divisions to protect themselves. The United States, essentially, it's a protectorate of the United States. It's looked at as the United States as the last line of defense, right? I know I'll get tremendous criticism for that. President Trump has said that over and over again. The Secretary General of NATO said that President Trump was his best partner in trying to make NATO a more robust alliance. TPP was the same type of thing, the same type of ill-defined, generalized agreement that the United States is not going to get into anymore. America First means America in partnership, directly in bilateral agreements with countries. And so, what I would recommend is we get a bilateral trade deal with our partners in Japan, one that works for both parties, so we, the United States, don't have a $70 billion a year deficit, because we can't continue to do that, and we're not going to continue to do that. And we develop our military alliance and make it stronger. What we'll end up doing this is strong bilateral agreements with partners. We have trade deals that work for each other, and we have a military alliance that everybody throws into the till. And so the people in the United States know that exactly what their obligations are going to be. The days of these TPP, these general obligations, let me just talk about it for a second. I'm going to go from Europe all the way to the Persian Gulf, to the Straits of Malacca, to the Northwest Pacific. The United States is upside down on every trade deal. Yet, it is American taxpayers and American kids that underwrite that security. It's the United States of America that is the security guarantor of the rules-based international post-war order. And it is time not to hide behind things like TPP anymore. It's time for the United States, in partnership with allies, not protectorates. Because in TPP, you can act as a protectorate. That's not in your best interest, and it's certainly not in the United States' best interest. And it's not going to happen anymore. That is, I think, the underpinnings of the Trump revolution. That's what it means by America First. It doesn't mean American isolation. It doesn't mean America not in partnership with Japan. We're more engaged in the Northwest Pacific than we've ever been. We have 3 battle groups. 3 battle groups. Over here right now. 3 battle groups. Who else in the world is helping us out that much? I was a naval officer in the 7th Fleet. I was proud to be a naval officer. I love Asia. I always wanted to come here as a kid, and proud to serve in the Japanese Navy. But the South China Sea in those days was absolutely free navigation. There was no question about that, and everybody understood it was the lifeblood to South Korea, Taiwan, and Japan, and that's why it was a vital national security interest of the United States. So what has happened over the last 10 years, last 15 years? The Chinese call it a territorial sea. How did that happen? How did these stable aircraft carriers they built? Because global institutions and global organizations couldn't come to grips with it. And that's why I think President Trump has been so brave and courageous to actually say that he will be engaged here. But the days of the TPP type of amorphous arrangements are over.
Speaking of the American agent policy, who is conducting, the thinker? Because what I'm saying is that when Trump administration started, Mr. Trump called Taiwan president, and it made a big fuss. But I understand it was by you or Mr. Navarro who planned it, and I thought it was a very good start. then somehow it turned the other way around. And Mr. Trump seems to like President Xi Jinping very much personally, and that worries us.
That's why I think Monday is so important. Let's go back. And actually, the Taiwan president called President Trump. Here's the one thing I would want everybody to take away from this, is that President Trump sets his strategy. He's always derided and mocked and ridiculed as a strategist and a thinker and someone who understands geopolitics. He's a very astute and brilliant businessman that's a great negotiator that has done deals all over the world. Okay? If you go back and look at what he said about China for the last 30 years, it's dead spot on. And if we had implemented what President Trump was saying as a private citizen 30 years ago, we would not be in the jam we're in today. And we're in a jam. That's because Donald J. Trump, his thinking about China, his understanding of Asia. Now, I understand when the call came in, and by the way, I would respectfully submit it was neither Peter Navarro's idea. But President Trump, because he's a man of peace, the opposition party, what did they say about him in the campaign? He's trigger happy. He shouldn't be allowed near nuclear weapons. He's a danger. There has not been one president we've ever had that's been more judicious, that's been more reflective. It took us 6 months to make the Afghanistan decision. Why? He continues to question. He probed. He will not take simple answers. And that's what you saw in Asia. After Prime Minister Abe came, he had President Xi. And he reached out. We had these committees and these groups, and he reached out to him on Korea, he reached out to him on trade. And I think you're seeing, as reported by the Financial Times and Reuters on Monday, will be a strategy that for the first time, it calls China a strategic competitor, right? Not a strategic partner, strategic competitor, and calls them an economic, guilty of economic aggression against the United States, Japan, and the West. Okay? That is by the way, that's been being worked on the entire time. No president, neither Bush nor Clinton, had the guts to issue a 301, which essentially said, you're not going to steal our intellectual property anymore. You're not going to take our intellectual property for market access. That's Donald Trump. So yes, I understand. By the way, he wants to have warm relationships, just like they criticize him for trying to have a warm relationship with Putin. Wouldn't we like to end the Cold War? You know, the people that all rag on President Trump and get on him. My daughter's a graduate of the United States. I was a naval officer. My kid brother's a Navy pilot. I have nephews in the military, family members in the military. My daughter is a graduate of West Point and served with the 101st Airborne in Iraq. Now, I don't deserve any special. We're just another blue-collar family. We are just people, working-class people, whose kids serve. It's those families that would like us to have peace with Russia. It's those families that would love us to work out something with China. It's those families that understand we have a partnership and alliance with Japan. That is the Trump revolution. It's working-class people who pay the bills and whose kids are some of the 7,000 dead in the Middle East and 52,000 wounded. The present value of our wounded, the net present value of the care of our wounded, according to the Watson study, is $1 trillion. And it's not the money, it's the agony. Think of the agony that goes into that $1 trillion. That's what the hobbits in Ohio, in Wisconsin, in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, in Iowa, in North Carolina. Trump's thing didn't come out of nowhere. It came out of a rejection by working people in the United States of America of where the elites have put us. And to say that our children are no longer expendable, and our capital and our treasure is no longer expendable on your projects.
よろしいですか。TPP の先ほどに戻りますけれども、二国間を優先するという選択ですよね。二国間を。で、例えば日米なら日米、そしてアジアの諸国と二国の関係をむしろ強化していくと。 いうのはよくわかるんですけども、先ほどおそらく木村さんの趣旨もそうだと思うんですが、やはりアジア全体に対する中国のプレゼンスがどんどん大きくなっていく中で、自由貿易を本当に守る盟主としての日米という立ち位置を作るということは非常に重要だと思うんですね。で、タイミングが今なのか、もう少しアメリカの内政をトランプさんが、プレジデントが確立してからかは別にしても、この包括的に自由貿易をアジア圏で守るという発想に対してはどうお考えでしょう。
First off, you used a very hot word, free trade. Okay? Free trade is a radical idea. Free trade is a radical idea. The Chinese don't practice free trade. They're a mercantilist system. We want our brethren, our allies, our partners in Japan to give us some free trade. Now, we would love, I think, yes, TPP was all fine. But let's be honest. Japan, India, Australia, South Korea, the major powers, right, that have to be put together. What we have to do is a strong bilateral deal with trade with Korea and the United States. With the United States. And President Trump has been, I think, he calls it reciprocity. Reciprocity. President Trump has been enormously consistent about this since he came in. He wants reciprocity. We're not going to get into these big amorphous deals where we don't really understand the trading relationships. And guess what? TPP was a perfect sucker's bet for the United States. No offense, it's like NATO, right? You guys get a free ride. You get a free option. You want to translate? You want to? That's right. I didn't see any clap. I didn't see any applause. I'm just kidding. The rejection of TPP means there's no more free option. We're not going to enter into these big amorphous deals where the United States at the end of the day becomes the security guarantor of a bunch of folks that are not going to pull their weight. Bilateral agreements with real partners and real allies that work on what President Trump has done, which is extraordinary. He's linked, okay, economics with national security. The combination of commercial relationships, trade deals, capital markets, and national security is all now tied together. But you do it in a way that you understand exactly what the deal is. And so, all I can recommend, if the Japanese intelligentsia is sitting around waiting for us to re-hit the bid on TPP, it's not going to happen.
ありがとうございます。より強い二国間同盟が複数アジアとアメリカの間で結ばれると、それ自体がパワーになるというお考えだというふうに大体理解しました。そうすると、少し私今日本で、大手メディアと、喧嘩をしている最中なんで、少しその点からお話ししますとですね、その自由、いわゆる我々民主主義国家の中で今非常にその共同して戦いにくくなっている大きな原因がリベラルメディアの変更だというふうに思っています。その点多分バノンさんと認識を一致していると思うんですけれども、で何が起こっているかというと、自由社会のリベラルメディアが、保守的な考え方やあるいは保守的な政権を非常にこう攻撃をする。それをすればするほど実は中国に対して自由社会側が弱体化しているんではないかというのが私の基本的な認識なんですが、バノンさんのその点についてのお考えをちょっと伺いたいと思います。
The mainstream media, the liberal media, remember, they are the running dogs of the globalists. They are they're a propaganda machine. And I'm not just picking on our brethren here in Japan. It's worse in the United States. And worse than that in Western Europe. If you are a nationalist, right? First thing they call is an ethno-nationalist or white supremacist. No. President Trump is the most colorblind person I've ever met. He believes in, regardless of your race, your ethnicity, your color, your religion, your place of origin, your gender, or your sexual preference. As long as you're a citizen of the American Republic, you're not going to be abused by the economic hate crimes that have been foisted on the American people through these horrific trade deals and trade relationships. And so I realize the burden here in Japan is just like in the United Kingdom. I mean, the Breitbart site in London was quite tiny, but at least allowed the ideas of UKIP and ideas of the working class people in England for Brexit, which, remember, when Brexit started, they were mocked and ridiculed. A week before Brexit, they said they were down 8 points, and they won. In fact, I think they actually declared that the Remain campaign was going to win early in the evening. So, I can tell you from the legacy media, these new startups in conservative media, they're another voice, or a platform for another voice, I think are going to be a big part of the future of media. And by the way, I'm a capitalist. The mainstream media in Japan should welcome robust competition. Robust competition from a range of media. And let the best companies win.
Speaking of fake news.
Can we have another question about TPP?
I think we Japanese are victimized by American fake news. Am I saying too much? Because what we have is all mainstream media, and Japanese media are affiliated to those media. So we don't have any alternative news source. And I know you are having Breitbart. And my suggestion is, why don't you have your Asian bureau in Tokyo
Just to make their heads blow up, we're definitely looking at starting a Breitbart Asia and Breitbart in Japan, South Korea, and other places. We've spent a lot of time. Anybody wants to volunteer, I'd love to talk to people afterwards. Now, but I think it's a great point. In fact, somebody told me when I came over here, if I could actually address the fact, and that's why I talked about the nullification project. They said, with all the news coverage that you get in Japan, you would think that President Trump's going to be impeached tomorrow morning. Okay. He is not only not going to get impeached, that if President Trump stays on completing what he's promised he would complete, and that he's already done such a great job in his first year, not only are we going to hold the Senate and the House in 18, President Donald J. Trump will win re-election with 400 electoral votes. The hobbits and the deplorables and the forgotten men and women that put him in office in November of 2016 will never allow him to be run out of office. They will only be there for him to make sure he wins a glorious re-election.
Yeah. Speaking of next election, being a journalist, I have to throw you a nasty question. After Alabama, have you changed your thought of fighting with Mitch McConnell's people, Main Street GOPs, that include probably Mr. Trump? Do you have changed that strategy?
Absolutely not. I think Alabama is a great example of, you got to remember, everything you see in the fake news industry on cable TV in the foreground, whether it's CNN or MSNBC or Fox, is all pro wrestling, right? It's all fake, right? It's what really goes behind, it's what really goes on. We have one party, the Uniparty. It was the Republican establishment, led by Mitch McConnell, that helped weaponize the information that got to the Washington Post and tried to destroy Judge Moore. The Republican establishment was very comfortable with giving up a seat to a progressive Democrat. All the cards are on the table. Senator Shelby came out on Sunday morning on the talk shows and said he was going to write in another candidate. That was the tipping point. The number of write-ins are greater than the margin for defeat. The Republican establishment from the very beginning, in the constant battle, and by the way, it was Chuck Todd of NBC that said, from the time the information came out of the Washington Post to Mitch McConnell 57 minutes later saying, Moore's got to step down. It looked like an organized hit. It's the Republican establishment has shown their cards to the Trump movement that they would rather have a radical, progressive, leftist like Doug Jones in the United States Senate. So all their whining and all their crocodile tears washes over the Trump movement. We're going to actually hold them more accountable. What we need in the United States Senate is people that have the president's back. And they say, well, all these guys vote for President Trump most of the time. I said, Bob Corker comes out and says, the President of the United States, who's taking on China, we have troops in the field in the Hindu Kush of Afghanistan, we have a very dangerous situation in Saudi Arabia and Qatar in the Gulf, and yet Bob Corker, who is the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, can come out and say that the president needs adult daycare, and who's got the morning watch? Right? And not one Republican senator, led by Barrasso and Deb Fischer and others are for re-election, Heller, not one have come to the sticks and said, it is unacceptable for you as a chairman to say that about a commander-in-chief in time of war from my party, and you should retract the statement or step down as chairman. Not one. And the Trump movement, the hobbits and the deplorables will not find this acceptable. They know exactly. Go ask the folks in Alabama. They know who threw that election to the Democrats. No. We won't back off 1 inch. And people, by the way, I didn't quit on Billy Bush weekend, and I ain't quit now.
Correct me if I was wrong. I think it was Vanity Fair, October this year, quoting you, saying that Mr. Trump has 30% chance of fulfilling his term. Was it
that was fake news.
Fake news.
No, because that's what they wish would happen. And they know that the hardcore Trump supporters, right? And I've said, in fact, I came out when that thing was put, I came out the next day and said, not only will he fulfill it, when he runs for re-election, we will win 400 electoral votes with the way that he's accomplishing objectives. They remember, we came within 1 point of winning Minnesota, and we only went there one time. States like New Hampshire, which they stole from us, we've proven now in the Electoral Commission, they stole New Hampshire from us. Minnesota, Nevada, Colorado, New Mexico, all of these states are in play now. And if President Trump just keeps on, he's got 4% economic growth right now. If the tax cuts kicks in like we think he could, he can have 5% growth or greater. So no, I think President Trump's on the way for, if he decides to win a massive re-election. And I think Vanity Fair is, once again, fake news.
もしですね、今ちょうど経済成長の話がありましたけども、日本でも安倍政権になって、劇的な経済的な回復が見られます。5年間の間に有効求人倍率 0.7 から 1.5 のようなですね、ほとんど日本の経済が最盛期に近づいているにもかかわらず、やはり日本の大手メディアでの、安倍叩きというのは、壮絶を極めているんですね。そしてこの日本でももちろん権力を監視するのは重要ですけれども、しかし日本でもアメリカでもヨーロッパでも実際に国民にとっての国益になる、そういう政府をメディアが国民の考え方と大幅にずれたところで批判し続けている状況があると思っていますが、その中でバノさんがブライトバードを今この数年経営されている。で、ヨーロッパの保守系の戦いは相当私は厳しい状況になって、むしろ極右化が進んでいると思いますが、アメリカでうまくいった、あるいはブライトバードが果たした役割というのはどういうものなんでしょうか。
Look, I think to a large extent, Prime Minister Abe was really Trump before Trump. And he talked about, right, a nation's pride, a nation's destiny, a nation taking control of its future. It was that nationalism that he installed into the conversation in Japan that I think was so controversial. That complete utter rejection and shock and dismay by the global elite media. I think today, when I got to my hotel last night, I had the Japan Times in front of me, and on the front they showed the tremendous confidence that manufacturing executives in this country have because of Prime Minister Abe's policies. And you can see his policies kicking in, President Trump's policies kicking in, two leaders who think alike. And yet, you just follow the media every day. It's a constant barrage of negativity. It's a constant barrage. What they're trying to do is every day by putting in people's heads, particularly people that don't pay that close attention, they want the background noise to be to delegitimize them, to make their jobs even harder. And that's why I'm so proud of the Breitbart site. Right? And there's others that are in the United States that are coming up that will be just as good. I like that. I love competition. I'm a capitalist. But I'm very proud that Breitbart fights above their weight. The Harvard study that the New York Times Magazine had a cover story about us about a month ago. Harvard did a study that showed, the news site that has the most political punch of any of them, regardless of their size, was not CNN, was not the New York Times, was not the Washington Post, was not the Huffington Post, it was Breitbart. And that's because conservatives are hungry for the truth. And you'll find that there are more conservatives out there than you think. They may not be registered Republicans, but those are the people that voted for Donald Trump, and those are the people that understand that what's back here is a total scam. They're just, all they are is the mouthpieces for a globalist elite. I call them the party of Davos. Right? The party of Davos. And they're the information officers of the party of Davos. But your compadres, your fellow citizens, are hungry for the truth. And so I hope in Japan, and I hope one day to be able to, not too soon, to be able to launch Breitbart Asia and have it headquartered in Tokyo. But regardless, if there are other Japanese entrepreneurs that will do it, when you launch these, you will find out that there is a hunger out there for this news. There's a hunger out there for this information. There's a hunger for something more than they've been spoon-fed. People want freedom. And people want to be in charge of their own destinies and their own future. And as long as we have that, and as long as we provide a platform to get alternatives to what the mainstream tell them, we're going to be fine.
I was twisted to take questions from the audience. Would you mind? Wait a minute. Some female question.
Female?
Yeah, right there. Okay. Gender equality.
Thank you very much. I was so moved by your talk. My name is Sako Matsumoto from Nagoya City University. I'm a professor and teaching international relations. Talking about the bilateral relations, which you emphasize, Japan, US, and it's very convincing. And you are very critical about international organizations such as United Nations. And you are completely true, but in some other aspects, for example, in order to pressurize countries like China, because their Chinese people are suppressed freedom of speech, undermine the human rights, etc. So in order to pressurize China, international organization could be useful. And how you are still very negative about United Nations or international organization?
I think that it's a great question, and I think that they can be useful, but I don't think that the primary source. Look, we're in not good shape. I just went through the 5 areas that if the current regime in Beijing completes One Belt, One Road, the rollout of 5G, right? Made in China 2025, the West and Japan and our allies will be at a significant disadvantage and maybe unable to unwind that. The United Nations is not going to help either. We've got to face reality. And the United Nations and these other groups are fine in doing kind of augmenting what has to be done. What has to be done is what allies like Japan and the United States binding together in the Northwest Pacific in demanding that China take full and complete accountability over North Korea. That is a vital national security interest right now for Japan. And the UN is going to be tangential. Look at the UN sanctions that just took place. And I think, and I tip my hat to Ambassador Nikki Haley, her entire team that went and got twice, I think, against North Korea, sanctions put in. But I think everybody would agree that those sanctions, how are they being enforced? What really has to happen is pressure of the United States and Japan directly to China to say we have to cut off the oil, you have to cut off the ballistic missile technology, you have to cut off all the expertise, you have to cut it off. And if you do not cut it off, there are going to be significant repercussions. And what we mean by that is real sanctions on your companies, and we're going to decouple your banks from the global capital markets. The United Nations is not going to help you do that. The IMF is not going to help you do that. So yes, I think all these post-war institutions are very important, but I think in this current situation, once again, it's bilateral relationships, and particularly in this case, to Japan and the United States.
日本語でもいいですよ。どうぞお手を挙げてください。どうしようかな。
Make America great again?
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I am Yoko Mada, aka Random Yoko on YouTube. I'm a YouTuber, basically. I'm the biggest Trump supporter in Japan. I wanted to...
It was just randomly I called on her.
Yeah, and I'm Random Yoko. So what I wanted to ask you is about the National Day that President Trump set signed for the victims of communism, like after the 100 years of the revolution. And we Japanese were very happy to hear about the National Day that President Trump signed, because we're fighting the same fight here in Japan, which is the transformation of communism, communism fight, which is the globalist fight. And I wanted to ask what you think of the National Day that Trump signed.
Well, I think it's terrific. I think that the victims of, look, the 20th century was the bloodiest century in mankind's history, right? It was the bloodiest century in mankind's history. But we do have to remember one thing. The Russians were our allies in World War II to defeat the Nazis. So, sometimes the enemy of my enemy is my friend. We always have to keep that in mind. I realize the global scourge of communism, which we thought came to an end in 1992. It turned out it didn't. So I think it's great that we're remembering those. I know it's a very important thing for President Trump.
Can I say one more thing?
I tell you what, can we give the microphone?
If you're starting Breitbart Asia,
Okay. That's called a pitch. Can we have this gentleman right here?
今日はあまり安全保障についてあれではないんですけども、象徴的なこと一つ昨日産経新聞出てましたけれども、米軍在日邦人の在日人の邦人だけでなくて邦人の避難についてですね、なんか米国としか話をしないっていうのが出てましたけれども。私は在日米軍との関係はささか深い関係にありまして、でその助言に基づいて 安倍総理に2年以上前に在日邦人の避難について話し合っておくべきだということを2年以上前に安倍総理に申し上げています。でところが在韓邦人の日本への避難については韓国の大統領はアメリカとだけ話し合いたいと言ってるんですね。でこれ象徴的な問題なんですけど、避難といざという時に避難だったらもちろん米国人在韓邦人ももちろんですけども、韓国人の避難さえも考えているんですね、日本に押し寄せることをですね。ところが韓国が日本以外の米軍としか話をしないんだけど、
端的にちょっと質問していただかないと時間がかかっちゃいますけど、どういうご質問でしょうか。要するに避難問題は日本とちゃんと韓国とやれと、こういうことでよろしいんでしょうか。そういうことでちょっとお答えいただきます。The question was, in short, the Koreans are refusing to cooperate with Japan to evacuation of Japanese in case of war. What do you think?
Obviously, that has to be worked out with the South Korean government, but hopefully, we're in a situation that war is not going to come to the Korean Peninsula. That's why I think it's incumbent upon leaders, and I think President Trump has done a tremendous service to the Northwest Pacific in trying to engage China and take care of the situation. I mean, President Trump this has been at the forefront of his mind. You can read I'm not giving any inside information, I'm just reporting what I see in the press. But as much as I would be concerned about people in the Japanese in the peninsula of Korea, I think the Japanese people ought to start getting worried about Japanese on the island of Japan. I mean, it shouldn't be lost on you where these ballistic missiles are being tested over. And I'm not seeing the level of, and I appreciate the fact that people are worried about the embarkation of Japanese citizens in South Korea to come to Japan. But if the balloon goes up and there's war in South Korea, a place to hide is not going to be Japan. Just not. And I think that's I don't understand the disconnect that's here from political reality. That's why I said in my talk, great leaders face reality. And I think with Prime Minister Abe and President Trump, and these are not pleasant things to talk about. I said that all the easy decisions are 5, 10, and 15 years ago. You got to remember what all the geniuses told us. All the experts and all the geniuses told us that Korea wasn't going to have a nuclear weapon, right? That this wasn't going to happen. We've been playing that game for 20 years. How many do they have? And I'm just talking open sources. Is it, 30, 40, 50, 60 nuclear weapons? I think they tested in open source literature. I think they tested a thermonuclear weapon over Labor Day. So I appreciate the fact that you're worried about the embarkation of Japanese civilians and citizens in South Korea. But if that ever happened and war came to the peninsula of Korea, the embarkation back here to Japan, they're not going to want to go. They're going to take the boat someplace else. Right there. Take two.
私は韓国にいてです。今日ここに参加して本当とてもありがたいと思います。で、質問したいことは、今韓国はムン・ジェイン政権が入って今までの政権と全く違う政権なんですね。それは私の韓国の国民として自由民主主義を目指してきたそういう気持ちなんですけど、今韓国のムン・ジェイン政権は清和で重視した国を動かす人たちは北朝鮮の大衆主を主張する、そういう人たちが全部支配しています。それを考えてみると今アメリカと同盟関係がとても難しい状態に来てるんじゃないかなという考えが国民が多いです。それが去年韓国でパク・クネ大統領が弾劾された時にムン・ジェイン政権を動かした その後ろの力が中国のあるとその話があります。そしてそのソウルのずっとろうそくのデモがある時に中国の6000人の留学生が集まってそのろうそくデモを動かしたことが事実のことです。それを考えると1973年にベトナム戦争の時にパリ協定の時にそのパリ平和協定が結局ベトナム石化された、そういう話が歴史事実です。で韓国の国民は今一番
Is there a question in here somewhere?
心配するのは
Just get to the question. I want to get some other. Give me the question. No, what's the question?
で質問は
Here's the answer. I don't have.
今
What's the question?
韓米同盟関係がこれからどうするかって話を、
Listen, I think to a large extent, and I think this is very important. I see the election in South Korea a little bit that brought President Moon to think is that a little bit. I call it the Korean Brexit. I think the Korean people kind of did have a degree voted on how the industrial economy of South Korea is managed and run, and that's fully their right. I mean, it's a vibrant, robust democracy in South Korea. Those types of things have to happen. I think President Trump would be the first one to tell you, if you read in the newspapers, I think he has a very good relationship. And I think on the trip to Asia, one of the things that he I think felt came off the best was talking to the Korean Parliament. So the United States still has a great relationship with South Korea, and it's going to go through different phases of it. But I think the South Korean people understand that it's a very tough situation over there. And so I think the United States understands that, and I think that we've been a great ally. We've been a great ally. Remember, before the Vietnam War, we had a horrific war on the peninsula of Korea that the United States lost, thousands and thousands of soldiers and Marines in. So the bond of the South Korean people in the United States, I don't think has ever been stronger, although there are obviously differences. But that's why I think President Trump has really gone out of his way and has a really terrific relationship with the president of South Korea. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much. My name is Hanako. I'm a journalist of the Liberty magazine in Japan. One of the very impressive aspects about you is your conviction to Judeo-Christian bias. Could you share with us how you came to defend Western values that are so badly needed to fight against Asia's communist regime, such as China?
And how I came to defend Western values?
The values that are so badly needed to fight against China.
Of the Judeo-Christian values. Yeah. Look, I think it's one of the great benefits of the Judeo-Christian West. And I think it's one of the things in partnership with Japan, we were able to, after the war, work together. But I think principally, I think it's even as much as democracy is important. I think the rule of law, and I think it's one of the things. If you talk to people in China, talk to people in mainland China, the rule of law, so you don't get the knock on the door in the middle of the night and you just get taken away to a prison camp, or all your money's not confiscated. So I think those values of kind of freedom and democracy, but principally the rule of law, I think it's one of the great things that the West has worked on for 3 millennia, right? And I think that's one of the things that will get us through in the future. So thank you. By the way, I want to thank you for all the questions, and it was fantastic. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
この後小川さんがちょっと花束贈呈。